Welcome to the Circuit Loop, a podcast that takes an up-close and personal look at innovation in and around the credit union ecosystem. Once a month, we'll bring you in-depth interviews with the people within credit unions and the companies they work with who are making innovation happen. The Circuit Loop is brought to you by Circuit, formerly known as Members Development Company, a 25-year-old CUSO dedicated to providing innovation and development to the credit union industry. I'm Brian Link, CFO at Circuit, and I'm honored to be your host. So without further ado, let's get started. On today's podcast, I'm pleased to have a few of my Circuit colleagues joining me to talk about what we consider to be the heart and soul of the work we do on behalf of our owners and the credit union movement, our innovation projects. In what will be a two-part discussion, I'll first be joined by Alex Johnson and Dustin Benz, our lead project managers, to dig deep on what we're currently up to and how those projects are structured. After that, I'll jump over to a discussion with Ethan Cunningham, our Chief Strategy Officer, who oversees our project portfolio. I'll get him to discuss our strategy as it relates to project selection and curation, areas of focus, and the ways we're trying to balance the need for depth versus breadth when it comes to innovation in credit union land. This is a particularly meaty discussion as it explores where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, for what Circuit is all about. So I hope you come away with a better sense of the innovative work we have in progress, the why behind the work, and the core team making it happen. I hope you enjoy my two-part conversation, first with our project managers, Alex and Dustin, and then with our Chief Strategy Officer, Ethan. Alex, Dustin, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you guys on. How you doing today?
Hey man, great to be here. Thanks for
Good,
having us,
thank
BL.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So question for you, and you can think about this. It's pretty heavy, so be ready. How does it feel to be the first Circuit folks on the Circuit Loop podcast?
Honored.
We're hoping everybody's got a little FOMO. That's what we're looking for here. So you
No,
guys can take
that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to build here, is that we can get everybody up here. But yeah, it feels great to be a part of the first one.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, I feel like I am really excited to have you guys on. To do really a kind of a bit of deep dive into what, when I think about Circuit, this is really the heart of what Circuit is all about, our innovation project portfolio. But before we get into the kind of the nitty gritty, let's start by making sure our audience knows a little bit about the two of you and kind of who you are and where you came from. So Alex, why don't you start by giving us a little bit of your background and kind of how you got to Circuit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like I kind of grew up in credit unions. I started my career at a credit union, specifically Sound Credit Union in Tacoma, Washington. I joined the marketing team as a marketing assistant. I was actually managing physical brochures. They were like actually in the branches. I don't know if there's many still in there. But then I moved over to the community relations team. And then I had the opportunity to build out our member experience function there, which was really exciting. From there, I went over to Lending Club and I led their customer experience program for their operations team out of Lehi, Utah. And then after that, my next stop was to join the project team at what's now Circuit. It was MDC at the time. And I've been here just over 3 years.
Awesome. Awesome. And Alex is the veteran on this podcast because both Dustin and I are newbies for sure. So with that, Dustin, same question for you. Give us your origin story and how you got here.
Yeah, I like to label myself as a failed barista that ended up working in digital banking. So my first job was actually a contract job. I had like 6 months of implementing Pop Money Mobile for a digital banking provider. And then I stuck around, I was blessed to stick around to do website development for them. Moved into the implementation teams there, implementing, all sorts of projects, SSOs, online statement stuff. Ended up going and managing those teams, and then moved in product for a large digital banking provider as well. And so for me, the love of what I do is just come from interacting with credit unions and as a whole, and just understanding the ethos of what they are, of just building in the community. I think credit unions are beneficial to every community that they work in. So what a wonderful place to be in. And then about a year ago, it's about 6 weeks until a year that Brian and I will both be here.
Yep.
Um, and just really excited to be here and just focused on what's new and helping innovate and develop new solutions for credit unions.
Pop money. That's a blast from the past, Dustin.
Oh yeah,
Hadn't thought about that one in a while. But there you go. That's how innovation works, right? You look backwards
that's
and you
it.
realize
Hey,
where you
that's
came
where we
from.
are now. Look at where we are now.
That's right. That's right. All right. So let's now that we kind of got a sense of the two of you, let's turn our attention to the projects themselves. So Alex, how about you give us just a quick thumbnail sketch on the projects you're currently working on? We don't need to go into, I know we've got sort of a variety of projects in flight and some on the board, so to speak, that haven't come off yet. We'll get to that a little later when I talk to Ethan. But Alex, specifically, tell us what you're working on right now, and then we'll kind of go from there. Dustin, I'll give you the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I do first want to give really quick shout out to the Deepfake Detection Project. All of those deliverables are on the portal, and also just a bigger shout out to the portal. That's kind of where you can find these ongoing updates on the projects that we're working on. But as far as right now, obviously this is a bigger group project, but I'm helping to support the business case group for the digital asset stablecoin tokenized deposit project, as well as
Which
the
has been
small.
going on since last fall, right? So that one's
Yes.
that's a big daddy for us for
Big
sure.
undertaking. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Like I said, team effort there. We all are kind of managing different parts. And then the business analytics project. So we're focusing a kind of a series of projects on small businesses. And this is the second in that series. The first was the business banking onboarding. Now we're really kind of focusing on tools and frameworks to help credit unions grow their small business, like the deposits, the loans, business members. So that's been a really great project. And then this other one, it's not necessarily a project, but getting to help support the innovation and ideation team. And that group is really kind of helping us keep that steady pipeline of new project ideas. So getting to kind of support that in some of our project work as well.
So tell us about that team because that sounds like it's an internal team, but I tend to have a little bit of insider knowledge here. So talk to us a little bit about what that innovation group is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that group is made up, I think there's about 25 executive leaders from our owner credit unions who are a part of this. They meet every other month, and we are really there to kind of focus on, what's keeping them up at night? What are the problems? What are they looking to solve that they can't solve on their own? So meeting with this group to have these discussions, and it's really trying to help shape our project ideas and keep, again, like that steady pipeline of these new projects that we're going to pull from and prioritize. So it's a really, really awesome group to be a part of and support. But yes, you are right. It is our owner credit unions and their leaders on this advisory team.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. Thank you. Dustin, same question for you. Tell us about what you're working on.
Yeah, so same as Alex, in terms of the tokenized deposits and stablecoin ecosystem, working there with the technology group. So a lot of the nerdy folks, right? Like getting in there, like how this actually integrates into their digital banking systems and stuff like that. I've had the luxury of working with a lot of folks across our credit union ecosystem with that. And then happy to announce, I think it went out last week, that I'm actually going to be taking on a project related to vendor management, right? There's a lot of sprawl where it comes to technologies that exist within credit unions and their understanding of contracts, if they have duplicate systems within their ecosystem and things like that. So looking to build that advisory group. So if you're listening to this and that sounds interesting to you, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have you there. And then, of course, our accelerator program that we've done. When I came in June, we finished cohort. We started cohort one. We're just about to wrap up cohort two here in June, and then about to announce cohort three around the same time that we're wrapping up cohort two. So very excited about that.
And cohort one, three companies, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, three companies: Swaystack, Jupid, and Harness. All of them, have been integral in the development of that. Not only from their perspective of how to integrate into the credit union ecosystem, but more so for us of how we develop our accelerator program as a whole, from our go-to-market strategy that we're focusing on with that accelerator program, and then the five that we have in this cohort, which is crazy to grow from three to five, right? For cohort two, with Ascent, Constant, Goodbye, Remint, and Ribbon. And just, it's
Yeah,
hard
I
to.
was putting you on the spot there. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no, it's
good.
it's
Yeah.
hard
Hey,
it's hard to be able to like rally that off the head, but yeah, but the same thing, a lot of fintechs that really care about the credit union ecosystem, and we're just looking for any opportunity that we have to give them an opportunity to better fit into the go-to-market strategy for credit unions as well.
and do we have an idea what are we targeting in terms of quantity for cohort three? Do you have any inside baseball you can give us?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to stick at five. We've had some productive conversations. I was actually at NACUSO a couple weeks ago where we got to meet with some fintechs there, and then also just through our application process on our website. If you go to circuitcu.com and see the accelerator application form, we've gotten a lot of reach out there. And so we're going to be I'm keeping it close to the vest right now because we're still trying to figure out what that
Of
next
course.
cohort's going to look like. But we're really excited for cohort three to be announced here in the next couple weeks.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, so Alex, you talked a little bit about your projects and sort of what's currently underway. Is there one in particular that's got you fired up? And if so, why? Not to, it's, it's hard to pick amongst
Pick
the
favorites.
children, it's like asking, a parent their favorite child sort of,
Yeah.
but which, give us one that's kind of got you excited and tell us why.
Yeah, absolutely. This small business analytics project has been really great to work with and work on. So, I mean, I really feel like credit unions are the heart of so many communities, and so are these local and small businesses. So, just to see that alignment between credit unions and looking to serve those small businesses has been fantastic. But this advisory team, too, in particular, I had mentioned this, we're doing kind of a focus of a series of small business projects. This group has carried on from that first project. So they are just really connected. They're really engaged in these projects. So they've been a lot of fun to work with. We also got to host a small business panel. So, oftentimes we're working with the credit unions and their leaders, but this was fun to kind of bring in some, business members or potential business members from across the country, really hear from them. Kind of what we learned too is, it's a really tough ask to ask them to make the switch, potentially for a financial institution because of the complexity involved with that and them just kind of perceiving it as being difficult. But these small businesses, they really kind of shared how much they care about being mission aligned, relationships in the community as well. So I think it just shows this really big opportunity for credit unions to kind of serve their communities, the small businesses, and really focusing on the growth. So that one has been a lot of fun to get to work on.
And it feels like there's a lot of, again, among the owner credit unions, there's a lot of interest in helping get better at this particular piece of the business, right? Given the historical nature of
Absolutely.
credit unions being primarily retail focused for so long, of such a
Mhm.
big part of their history, this feels a little bit. At least the sense I get is some of them feel like they're trying to catch up. Is that
Yeah.
a fair characterization?
That is, and one of the really unique things too, I think about Circuit in general, but this advisory team is all of these credit unions are at different kind of points on their journey, maturity levels for kind of serving small businesses. So there are some in there who are really there to eager to learn, to soak it all in, to say, what can I implement? What can I do? And there's some others who have a pretty rich history or a larger portfolio too, who are in there. Of course, they're learning alongside, but they're offering a lot of information and advice and kind of what's working too. So it's a really great group there, and yeah, to kind of see them along their journeys as well. So you're spot on with kind of that assessment.
Very cool. And that's collaboration in action, right? Good to see the crosstalk, right, between the credit unions themselves.
Definitely.
For sure, for sure. Dustin, same question for you. Tell us what's your fave, and it can't be the accelerator. I'm gonna take that one off the table because
Ooh,
I already know what you're gonna say there. That's too easy.
I mean, that's a little tough because I'm just
And you
getting
can go back.
into.
You can pick anything you've done up to now too. I'm gonna give
Yeah,
you a little bit of
I
range.
appreciate that. No, I mean, Accelerator is obviously the bread and butter. That's my baby. That's what I love, right? But I'll say I'm really excited about this upcoming vendor management project that we have. Um, Working with banks and credit unions just from a digital banking provider perspective over the last decade before I joined Circuit last June. It's amazing to me to see how little they understand like the ecosystem and how every product that they have within their ecosystem interacts with one another, right?
Mm.
And to be able to provide a project that can hopefully shed light over that and give them a clearer view as to what they're building and what they have within their ecosystem and what they need to be pursuing to is what I'm really looking forward to. But I'd say that because I'm venturing in, this is going to be the first big PMO project that I'm going to be taking on here really shortly. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I'd say that's the big one, aside from again, Accelerator.
Sure.
I'll just continue to plug that throughout this
I
podcast
was
and
sort of
talk about how
stipulating
awesome it
that,
is.
and I knew that
Yeah.
was the favorite. So yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny, we think about, you realize the ubiquity of technology inside a financial institution is such that you don't have to be very big for there to be a disconnect. You could have multiple different vendors and components operating, and understanding how those pieces and parts touch each other or where things work is difficult, right? And the bigger you get, the harder it gets, right? Even though you might have more money, and there are the in contracts and things out there, but those are really different than what I think the problem you guys are trying to solve is. I
Oh,
think
of
what they're
course,
all
yeah.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest thing is like, regardless of size, I think there's just disparate sort of procurement processes that exist within these credit unions. And what's been fascinating for us to hear from the feedback that we got when we decided that we were going to kick off this project is that like right hand's not talking to left. So maybe there's duplicative processes or technologies that they have across this that are doing the same thing, or they're evaluating other vendor technologies for a technology they already have within their ecosystem that does the thing they're searching for,
And
right?
they just
And
don't
so
know it, right? Yeah.
yeah, they just don't know it. And
Yeah.
so that's the big goal of what we're building. And so just kind of trying to bring that efficiency and understanding and that overview of what they have within their ecosystem is the thing that I'm most excited about bringing forward.
Very good. Very good. All right. So, Dustin, I'm gonna keep going with you, even though you had a little bit of a run there, but we'll keep you going just a bit. You've mentioned your past life, in implementations and product and on the digital banking side. Given that kind of experience, particularly on the complex implementation side, how did that help your transition to circuit, or maybe it didn't? Talk a little bit about how it did, and then maybe some things that surprised you as well, or some challenges with that transition.
No, I mean, I think my experience of working in digital banking for as long as I have and implementing, 1,500 products across 450 banks and credit unions that I was working with for that decade just really helped me understand and speak the language of the credit unions that we're working with. It provides that empathy in some ways of the way that they approach bringing in new technology there, right? It allows to speak the language a lot. And it also just allows me to be able to ask the right questions, I think, in these groups because credit unions do a good job of understanding the problems that they have within their particular credit union. But we joke about this all the time when we're talking to partners, but I think it's the same when we talk to credit unions. If you've met one credit union, you've met one credit union, right? And so being able to kind of just share that shared experience across it of like, hey, I've heard struggles from this perspective on the exact same topic that you're talking about it. Maybe it's at 10,000 feet versus 500 feet. But I've heard the same thing. Why don't you guys talk? Why don't we have that collaboration? And that's what the credit union environment provides, right? Is that collaboration aspect. It's a great environment to be here because in the credit union perspective, everybody just wants to work together. Everybody wants to build a solution that's suitable for everybody working in that credit union ecosystem. So to be able to kind of understand what their fears and inhibitions may be coming into the ecosystem is great, and understanding it as best as I can right now and continuing to learn, I think has been a big help for me from my previous life. So.
Excellent. All right. Well, Alex has transitioned, you having come more from the credit union side, right? You grew up in a credit union. That's the world you came from. What surprised you when you started working, kind of to Dustin's point? If you know one credit union, you know one credit union. Now you know multiple credit unions in the sense of your
Yeah.
experience. What what have you learned, and what's maybe surprised you about that sort of broader experience outside of, the four walls of sound?
Yeah, that's so funny. That same exact phrase came to mind, when I knew you were going to turn this back over to me. But I will say too, like getting to work in kind of that member experience and customer experience, it was almost like an in-house consultant, like serving all the different lines of business. You have to kind of know enough to be dangerous on all these, but definitely was not the subject matter expert. But to Dustin's point too, it just helped me learn how to ask the right questions too, as you're constantly learning every day. And so, yeah, you're right. Every credit union is different, like the approach to risk or product suites or policies or procedures. So I don't know that that is surprising, but to your point, I only knew the one credit union.
Right.
But really, I think the best surprise is while all these credit unions are different, and maybe it's unique to Circuit, I don't know. But all of our owners are really truly looking to best serve their members and their communities and everything that they're doing, their involvement here. They want to come together. They want to innovate for the sake of the members. And I think that has just been really exciting to see that that really does carry over between all of these credit unions all across the country. And that's why they're showing up to Circuit, and that's why they're giving their extra time to be on these projects. So it's just been really incredible to kind of get to know these credit unions across the country.
Very good. Very good. All right. Last question. Dustin, you'll go first.
Mm.
What is something that we're not working on right now that you're hoping we will be in the near future?
Oh man, that's hard. That's really hard.
I'm asking you to get out the crystal ball and think about the
No,
future,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. No,
easy
I'm
question.
thinking about it. Just from a personal standpoint of mine, financial wellness has always just kind of been a big thing for me. I think back to the first time me and my wife bought our first home, the one that I'm sitting in right now, and just understanding how credit unions could help in that journey. But I think the key thing that we're doing with our projects and even our accelerator platform as well is like we're listening to our credit unions, right? What gaps are in their systems or their approach to their communities that they don't have, and listening to them and bringing those new technologies in. So I'd say it's kind of a political answer, but I'd say that listening over the next couple of years of just like what are those gaps and how can we help fill them in that research and development perspective is the thing that I'm most excited about because it's going to be ever changing. I mean, nobody was talking about stablecoin 3 years ago.
That's
And
right.
here we are, right? So
And there'll
to
be something else 3 years from now that we're
yeah,
not
that's what I'm
talking about,
saying.
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like so to try to project what we're going to be talking about in a few years, but I think that the great thing that we do with Circuit and the credit union ecosystem that we have here is being able to listen to our owners and take that in and just
Yeah.
evaluate the new technologies that are going to be available to us in the next few years, and more than happy to be a part of it moving forward.
Good deal.
Mm.
All right, Alex, same question. Easy one for you. The softball, right down the fastball down the middle.
Well, and this is maybe a sneak peek for people who are listening to the podcast of what might be coming soon too. I think one of the areas that really kind of resonates for me and is kind of relatable to my generation too is that affordable housing kind of aspect. I have a friend, in the Bay Area, and through conversations, she said, if I stay here, I just don't see home ownership in my future. Ethan actually shared an article around this idea of hope and home ownership and folks who kind of lose that sense of hope. There's this almost threshold, what that does to kind of their financial health and some of like the might lead to riskier financial decisions that they're making. So I think that's a really interesting angle to kind of look at as well. But then what's that greater impact to credit unions when house prices continue to rise and younger generations are either not looking at that as part of their future or they truly can't afford it or attain it. So what does that mean for credit unions for the products that you're currently offering? What are ways that credit unions could kind of step in and help there too? So I think that's one that hits close to home for my generation, but I think it again it can be a part of that financial wellness, financial health as well. So
Right.
kind of
Those threads come
excited.
together for sure. When you think
Yeah,
about those are sort of overlapping in a lot of ways, right? I think that's maybe
absolutely.
the insight that you were talking about relative to the article. So
Yeah, so definitely excited to kind of dig into that, explore more, talk to some owners too, and kind of get their take on there. But yes, kind of a sneak peek if you're listening to this podcast of what projects you might see coming soon.
very good. All right, guys. I think I've kept you on the hot seat long enough. So appreciate the time very much. Again, the first official in-house guests on the Circuit Loop podcast. So I don't know, I'll have to come up with some sort of a t-shirt or a medal. I don't know. We'll figure out something. So look for that in your mailbox in the next 6 to 14 months. We'll see what we can come up with. So
We'll
thanks
hold you
again,
to
guys.
it.
Y'all have a great day.
I
Thanks,
appreciate you, Leo.
Brian. Great
Thanks, man.
conversation.
Ethan, welcome to the Loop. How you doing, man?
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. I'm doing well.
I I've been looking forward to this one as always because it feels like this is the kind of conversation you and I'd probably be having no matter what. But it's exciting to get to have it here recorded. So hopefully it'll shed a little light on some of the things that are going on. And as I was talking to folks, or when I talk to folks about Circuit, and consider what do I think is the heart of the operation? What is it what is it that we really do when you get down to it, right? The project portfolio is really at the center of what we do, right? We're an innovation shop. If we're going to do innovation, we've got to do projects, we've got to do work to generate innovation, right? To explore it, to feel it out, to figure out what are options, what are things we can do. Should we build things? Should we leverage fintech partners to do it, et cetera? All of those that myriad of questions, right? So you sit side at kind of at the center of that. So I want to dig into that and get into that obviously really quickly. But before we do that, give us a quick thumbnail sketch on your background and sort of origin story, kind of how you got here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've worked in this space for, oh gosh, going on 15 years now, with banks and credit unions, mostly on the digital banking side. Early on into some of the mobile app development and capabilities when I remember having conversations with financial institutions that we don't need a mobile app. That's not a channel that people are going to access going forward, or it's not secure, so we need to lock that down. So been in the fintech space since then. Took a
Dustin, by the way, was talking about his first project working on Pop Money. So
Oh yeah,
we've gone back a little bit. So this is,
absolutely.
here we go. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So also worked in the faster payment space a little bit with Intercontinental Exchange and one of their subsidiaries that dealt with crypto, the first institutional investment platform for cryptocurrencies. And then also worked in the GovTech space for a little bit too. So that's what drove me back to banks and credit unions because state and local governments shockingly sometimes work slower than financial institutions. So it's good to be back.
good deal. Good deal. All right. So to get us started, give us a high level overview of what circuit projects are really all about. What problems are we trying to solve?
Absolutely. So I think at the center of the circuit projects and the ethos behind a lot of our projects is really around de-risking innovation. And I think that as we look at R&D company-wide, market-wide, that's often a very expensive endeavor to go down. You've got to hire specialized individuals to participate in that. There's often a pretty heavy line item on a balance sheet around R&D. And there's risk associated with that, that not every single project is going to be a home run. Not every single endeavor that we take on is going to be the perfect thing. Then we find things like WD-40, which come by complete accident while we're trying to research something else, right? So that's where Circuit and our projects really come into play, is helping our credit unions de-risk innovation by collaborating together. Then we can reduce that risk across each one of those credit unions that are participating in that project. And I think that's something really special about this industry that's always really kind of shocking to me is how cooperative all of these credit unions are together. I know in some markets we've got more cooperative engagements with them, but it's really neat to have folks get on a phone call together and talk about shared joint problems that they have. And I think our projects really help emphasize those, but also help drive results for our credit unions too.
So the de-risking, let's talk a little bit about that. Is that you mentioned the financial piece, and that's sort of obvious, right? Pooling dollars together, everybody has a smaller share of a big pot, right? That's easy to get your head around. Are there other elements to the de-risking that you would sort of describe through the collaboration piece in terms of having the ability to talk across to other credit unions who may see things differently, or even volume, like the not just the dollars, but the volume of or the surface area of innovation through a mechanism like Circuit, as opposed to trying to do that solo?
Absolutely. And I've seen a couple of neat examples of that just from the short time being at Circuit since last January of 25. But one of the neat things that I see there is that collaborative effort that folks will ask a question on some of these calls and somebody else will raise their hand and say, we've tried that. And here's why that's not going to get you the results that you're looking for. And I think that that's something that helps us come out of our projects quite a bit. We've got one going on right now around some small business initiatives. And what's really neat is we've got a credit union on there that, as far as credit unions are concerned, is knocking it out of the park with small business opportunities. But they're still on talking about here's what we're doing and here's why it's working and here's what might work for you. So just being able to facilitate those discussions to allow other credit unions to hear in and say, okay, we've learned from them. Here's what they're doing that's working for them. Here's what they tried that isn't. And this is what they've done that probably won't work for us is a really valuable opportunity for our credit unions.
Yeah, it's sort of different dimension to de-risk, which is what I was trying to get at. So thanks for that. You mentioned sort of the varying experiences that owners bring to the table. That also, I think, maybe feeds into this next question, which is, what role do owner credit unions play when it comes to project selection and structure? Talk a little bit about that and how those differing perspectives play into that.
Just about every aspect of them comes from our owner credit unions. So it's important to us that we're working on projects that they care about and that they want to be invested in and that they feel are important to put up some of their resources just in order to participate in it, or maybe even take it a step further and actually test or try out some of the concepts that are coming out of these projects. And so as we're looking at future projects, we'll typically go through and poll our credit unions in terms of here's things that are surfacing that we're hearing, and these might be some interesting concepts for us to explore. And then we kind of get into a little bit of the five whys exercise of, why is that important? Why is that a struggle for you? In order to get down to that bottom layer and find out here's what's really impacting all of these credit unions across the board. Now, it's not going to be every single one of our credit unions is going to find these projects at the top of their priority list at any given time, but I think that's inevitable. And so we want to make sure that we're solving for things that even if it's not a priority now, that they can go back and take a look at the learnings of those projects later on when it is a problem or a priority for them, and they can learn and adjust based off of that. But when I think about our projects and how we undergo those, usually at our summer or winter owner meetings, we'll present a couple of different concepts to our credit unions and have them vote on what are the most important to us. And those are them. And that gets moved to the top of our queue so that they can take advantage of being able to be in the shared learnings for those projects. Another area, though, is I'm finding this very interesting that oftentimes we'll just sit around and riff on here's some left field, absolute blue sky type project initiatives. And I know there's a term for this, and you might know it off the top of your head, but when you hear a word for the first time, all of a sudden you start hearing it in multiple different places. And what's so funny is I've found that every single one of these projects where we think, oh, that would be a cool idea, but I don't know, it's kind of out there. Within a week, I have an owner come and talk to me about, hey, wouldn't it be neat if? And it's like, wow, this is just uncanny. This is too weird. So it's really cool to have their buy-in at those points in time to be able to know that we're working on something that's going to be important to them, even if it's just a small subset of our ownership base.
Well, you mentioned, having 80 credit union owners, you can't do a project that's going to be at the top of the list for every owner because that's, not realistic. At the same time, are there particular themes or problem sets that you try to concentrate on, or, sort of maybe thematic approach or broad, or things that you try to avoid? And if so, why?
Yeah, great question. I think overall, we kind of bucket each of our projects into a different category. So those categories are strategic growth, operational efficiency, member experience and engagement, or emerging technology. And emerging technology is kind of that broad swath of just about everything that we work on could theoretically be
Right.
considered emerging technology, but it helps us kind of bake in an area of this is going to be a blue sky project. This is going to be something that's kind of out there. But through each one of those four categories, we're often going to have something that every single one of our credit unions finds value in. And I think it ebbs and flows that right now, especially as we're looking at some larger, more macro impacts to our credit unions, that operational efficiency area has been top of mind for a lot of our credit unions. At times, they're going through a large growth mode. We've seen a lot of M&A activity start to crop up. So some of those strategic growth type opportunities might be important. And then for just about everybody else, that member experience and engagement category of projects is always going to have something of value. If you're a CMO, a CXO, you're leading the digital product suite at your credit union, you're going to find something of value in those projects. The second part of your question, though, is around things that we tend to avoid. And I know that that's an area that we don't want to be everything to everybody at Circuit. And so as I kind of think about that, there's really two things top of mind that come to my mind is we don't want to go too far into some innovation theater, just innovation for the sake of innovation. We don't need robot security dogs or anything like that guarding our data centers, for example. And then I think the other side is if there's no path to execution on some of these things, that there's some project ideas that we kick around a little bit that we just think, yeah, but that's going to require every single core provider, FIS, Fiserv, Jack Henry, Correlation, all of those core providers to get in line with something that we want to do. That's probably not going to be very feasible. Or maybe that's a longer term thing that we can start to chip away at a little bit. So if there's no path to execution, if there's not something, as you said earlier, that we can build or learn from, then there's really no opportunity for us. We're not going to dive into that too much.
Got it. Got it. So the concept of basic research really isn't in our, not really what we're up to, right? Even though we are trying to push the envelope, but not necessarily be that that foundational in that sense, or that sort of experimental. Maybe that's a better word.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
stay tuned for our credit unions on Mars project that we're going to kick off next year.
Sweet.
That's
Well,
going to be a
the
good one.
rocket ships
Yeah.
are there, so you're ready to
Yeah.
go. So let's take a step down and let's talk about sort of project lifestyle. Give us a sense of, and I know they're not all the same, so this is a little bit of a trick question, but give us a sense of project lifestyle, sort of at the high level, sort of from ideation to work to completion to and sort of rinse and repeat. Give us a sense of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll break this out to the different ways that our projects can go too, with some examples on that. But every project starts at inception of an idea, and it could be here's a major pain point that we're dealing with as a credit union, and we start to see a signal come from that that other credit unions are dealing with it. It could be a market shift that we see something that the neobanks are starting to take advantage of, or some of the other newer competitors in the space that are neobank adjacent, or a member expectation. I think generative AI is a great example of how member expectations are shifting how we think about banking going forward. And so it'll start with the inception of an idea around one of those pain points. And from there, we'll start to circulate that idea amongst our owners and figure out, is this something that multiple folks are dealing with, that they're struggling with and finding challenge in? From that point, then we'll start to work on some fairly entry level research around it. What's the scope of the problem that we're looking to deal with? What's the market impact of it? How is it impacting our credit unions themselves? And from that research, then we'll kick off a project. And so our projects will kick off. And the first few stages of those are really more around ideation and requirements gathering. So kind of putting on your product manager hat and saying, what are the challenges that we're dealing with, and how does that impact you and your job? How's that impacting your members when they're trying to take advantage of that? What's the process look like today, if there even is one? And so from that path, we'll either, or from that line of discussion, we'll either find one of three paths. Either there's somebody out there that's doing this today that our credit unions may not be aware of, or they're doing something that's tangentially related to whatever that problem is. It also might be a path that there are several providers that are doing something close to what that outcome might be, but we need to marry those folks up and get them to work together. And then the third path might be there's nobody out there that's doing this right now. And so we need to go and create that. And so there's been examples and opportunities from a number of our different projects out there that have led to one of those three paths, that either Circuit needs to actually go and build what that organization would be or what that product is, or we're marrying up different groups of folks to say, you do this really well, they do that really well. We need you guys to get together and work with our credit unions on it. Or it might be going to a provider and saying, we've got a captive group of 80 very large credit unions, and we think that your product roadmap should include X, and work with them on actually developing that using some of the requirements that we've gathered up outside of that project.
So that makes sense, and kind of again the various sort of iterations are clear. When talked about sort of what the mission is, or so the idea, this idea of de-risking and collaboration to bring more resources to bear on a problem and reduce risk. Can you give us an example or two where you feel like a circuit project has really lived up to that sort of ideal? Like that isn't necessarily, like we talked about, it isn't going to be the same for everybody, but conceptually we can think about that, I think, as success, more success or less. So give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, I think the first one is pretty topical for me right now, just because I've been seeing since I've been traveling all of the Teams messages coming in from a call right before this. But we've got a stablecoin project that's going on right now. That we've got a consortium of over 80 credit unions that are a part of it. It represents north of 25% of all credit union assets in the United States are part of this project. And what I find interesting about that is it doesn't matter if you're an $800 million credit union or you're a $190 billion credit union, you're still looking at this kind of scratching your head a little bit, wondering how are we going to bring stable coins into our infrastructure, our ecosystem, our member route through our product, whether they're a business member or a retail member. And so what we found through that project is that it's allowed us to have more discussion around some of the opportunity that exists in the space, that we don't need to be bleeding edge, but maybe a little bit more towards that leading edge in terms of some of that adoption. And so it's helped our credit unions understand, hearing from industry experts in nuanced little areas, whether it's a core provider or it's a niche player in the space of what they're doing with stable coins and tokenized deposits in order to understand what's the impact to me? What am I going to be able to do with it? And from there, especially on the de-risking side, is we've identified a handful of different pilot project opportunities for our credit unions to take shape with, where it's a relatively low cost for them in order to start to work through some of those use cases around implementing stablecoin and tokenized deposit technology. We don't have to roll it out to our members. We can just use it internally to begin
Right.
with, maybe grow into that later on, but helping them kind of understand here's how it will shape itself within our organization in order to be more successful. Another example of this, kind of around meshing some of those different providers, was the AI Studio project that we wrapped up late last year, early this year, in terms of being able to interestingly, that project started with the goal of we need Circuit to help us find the best in class AI providers that are out there. Which, if you're sitting in my seat, that's the scariest question that anybody could ever ask you because that's an impossible question. I think every vendor and their mother is an AI company at this point in time, and so it's really untenable. But when it comes to de-risking some of that, what we recognized through going through and putting our product hat on through that project was that we can't really say who the best AI vendor is. That it matters on the data that you have, the shape of the data that you're in, where your credit union's at right now, how your team internally feels about the usage of AI tools and the capabilities.
What are you trying to do?
Yeah, exactly. What are you trying to do? Which is the hardest question
Yeah.
to answer. And so what we recognized through that was there is no right answer for the best AI vendor for a chatbot, for loan processing, for anything. The best thing that we can do is bring together some advisors to be able to help our credit unions best understand where do they sit, what does their roadmap look like, what are they trying to do with some of these AI tools, and then giving them the tools and capabilities to test that out in a relatively low lift. One of the big things that we heard back and forth was this, we could call it the Spider-Man meme, where all of them are pointing at each other like this, where our credit unions were struggling with AI vendors that they were talking to and implementing some of these capabilities and then turning around and recognizing it's not doing what we wanted it to do or what we were told it can do. And the vendor's pointing at the credit union and saying it's your data's fault. And the credit union's
Right.
pointing at the vendor and saying it's your technology's fault. And there's no winning in that scenario. So giving our credit unions the tools and capabilities to be able to test some of those things out before implementing it, before going down a long,
Yeah.
lengthy path with that vendor and a relationship with that vendor that could ultimately turn sour, that was a really easy way that we could look at wrapping up that project and creating an entirely new organization out of that that's solely focused on bringing AI technology to our credit unions.
Yeah, so you gave two examples there, and that you mentioned them as highlights or success stories, right? Both have a very clear execution component, right? You've got the pilot opportunities on the back end of stablecoin, even though I know that's not done, it's
Mhm.
still in flight, but you've got execution opportunities in the form of pilots, and obviously with AI Studio, right? It's execution in action, right? It's a company that's been stood up to help credit unions take advantage of AI in a way that hopefully makes sense for them without it having to be, hey, we're selling a widget. It does this really cool thing. Trust us and buy it, right? Or the existing vendors who are now all AI companies, right? And we say that tongue in cheek. We're not being critical of them. We understand why that is, but it's made it that much harder for credit unions to tease this stuff out when all of a sudden every vendor you've got that was a fintech previously is now an AI company that does fintech. So, that's just a challenge to try to suss that out where and that's where your team can play a good role. I want to try to move along here, be mindful of your time. Um, let's talk a little bit about roadmaps. How do you think about and manage project roadmap, right? And that can be the time frame is really for you to tell me in terms of how you sort of block that out in your brain.
Yeah, in terms of a roadmap per se, it is difficult. I don't look at it so much as what a typical product organization roadmap would be, because I still see there's a little bit of waterfall aspect that comes out of that. That with our projects, we don't necessarily have a boom, this is done, and we're going to keep iterating on that
Right.
in terms of this is the next enhancement that we're going to take to the product. But with our roadmaps,
Past isn't necessarily future in that sense, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So as we look at it, though, there are a couple of themes from a roadmap perspective that are starting to crop up. That fraud is always going to be at the forefront of our credit union's mind. They're really struggling with that, and we're always going to be dealing with it. And so that's an area that we want to keep iterative projects going on. We had a really good one that wrapped up right at the beginning of this year. We're looking to bring another one on this fall, but the one earlier this year was around AI fraud that was happening in call centers. One of the things that we heard from our credit unions during the course of that project was, well, I mean, yeah, it happens in call centers, but it also happens in our HR department. It happens with some of our hiring exercises. And I can promise you, I'm a real person right here. I've heard there's a three-finger trick holding it up in front of your face. But that is a very real thing that our credit unions are dealing with in terms of synthetic employees. So we want to be mindful of those types of things as well. The other area that we're looking at uh, projects into perpetuity with that is around small business and ensuring that our credit unions have the ability to focus on the community that surrounds them and how important small businesses are to that. So as we're looking at projects throughout the year, we're coursing those out to make sure that every quarter we're kind of kicking off a new project and wrapping another one up in that sense. Now, some of these are a little bit fluffier around time frame that we'll make sure that we've got an end date, but if, for example, the stablecoin project, we said we wanted to wrap that up by 12/31. And just last week, we had a new ruling on that around some of the rewards. And I'll use ruling in air quotes there because there's still a lot of questions and gray area
Is it a
around
rule?
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've decided to progress that project and continue that on a little bit in order to make sure that our credit unions have everything that they need in order to feel successful going forward with it. So
Yeah.
as we're building that roadmap out, we're still focusing on those four key areas: the strategic growth, operational efficiency, emerging technology, as well as that member experience and engagement, and making sure that we've got projects at least one a year every year in those different categories.
Yeah, and I called it a roadmap. That's probably the wrong. It's probably more of a portfolio, right? And
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about it in
it
terms of in
absolutely
terms of a
program
portfolio,
portfolio.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a better way of describing it. So, all right. So to wrap up with the last question, or kind of two-parter to wrap it up. So when you think about the next couple of years, 2, 3 years, what excites you the most when you consider the project or problem landscape that we're looking at?
Yeah, I think what excites me is the appetite that our credit unions have to engage in some of these newer technologies and capabilities. I think we've started to see. I was actually talking to a buddy over the weekend over some beers about this, which is the right time to have this conversation around the commoditization of AI capabilities, and that everybody's starting to use some of this technology. And we're starting to see that across the board. I know people that are starting to code who have no business coding and never have in their life, but they're able to use some of these tools to build. And I think that's really exciting because we're going to be seeing probably this J curve in terms of new technology and capabilities that are exactly what our members are looking for, or exactly what our teams are looking for within our credit unions, and exactly what we need to solve the problems that we have. And right now, the ability and the pace of technology is outpacing our ability to use it, I think, at certain times. And so that really gets me excited because I think we're at this renaissance area in terms of innovation when it comes to technology as we know it.
Over that same time frame, the exact opposite or the inverse of that. What scares you?
Yeah, I think if you're watching this recording and you go back to the beginning, I probably had darker hair than I have right now at this point in the recording, because there is a lot of that that scares me. I think when I look at our landscape, the opportunity is there. Whether our financial institutions want to take advantage of it or not is completely up to them. And I get really spooked. I still remember exactly where I was when I got an email about Block rolling out small business checking and savings accounts. I remember exactly where I was standing, and I remember looking at the email and thinking, "Oh boy, this is a scary time that we're going under." I mean, they've got Cash App, they have the Square readers, they know exactly who's buying what in that mom and pop coffee shop right when it's happening. And they've got enough analytics to go back to that business owner and say, hey, the majority of your customers are coming from this zip code. So why don't you open up another location there? And here's
And they've
a
got the
40,
balance sheet, and they've got
yeah,
the balance sheet to do
balance sheet.
things, right?
Yeah, we
To
know
be
that
able
that venti
to
coffee
lend.
is selling the
Yeah.
best out of everything. So
Yeah.
here's $40,000 to go open up your new shop. We need to have those capabilities. Our credit unions need to be looking at stuff like that and be thinking about that scale that organizations like that have. So what scares me is this competitive crunch that we're seeing in this space that everybody is after every single account right now. But the technology is there. We have the ability to solve for those types of problems.
Well, on that, which I felt like you closed it out on a positive note, so I appreciate that. I'll let you get back to it. I mean, you and I could sit here and nerd on out on this stuff, I think, for hours. We don't have any beers, but if we had them, it would be even more interesting.
We should
But
do that sometime.
we should do that real
Yeah, the
soon.
after
Yeah.
hours
I think that,
one.
yeah, and
Yeah,
after
yeah.
hours. That's right. That's right. Well, Ethan, I appreciate you digging into this with me and giving, I think, a pretty good overview and explanation of sort of what Circuit's all about when it comes to the project portfolio. So thanks again, and have a great day. Great talking to you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. Thanks, man. Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Circuit Loop. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube if you prefer video, so you can hear each month's new episode. Take care and talk to you next month.